Hello and good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in continuation to our previous lecture on India's foreign policy continuity and change, we are again going to discuss about some ingredients, some important points regarding the very topic, the very subject, India and its relationship with the major powers. And for this, we have again with us in our studios Dr. Rajan Kumar. He is an assistant professor in School of International Studies, JNU. So first of all, I would like to welcome our expert, Dr. Rajan Kumar, and I would like him to explain in detail what is India's relationship with the major powers. Hello, sir. Welcome to the EDICIT lecture.
And in continuation with the previous lecture, as you said rightly, that it was on India's foreign policy. Today, I'll continue with the specific area, like what is India's relation with the major powers. So in that, today's subject to be covered on this topic would be what has been the India's strategy to deal with the major powers in the last 65 years from the time India got independence. The second would be the economic and security interests. So what are India's security interests in terms of the India relation with the major powers. After that, we'll talk about the bilateral relationship between India and the United States, which is the most important relationship of major power because USA is the hegemon of today's world. And apart from that, we'll also discuss with India's relation with two other countries, which are China. China is emerging important, and you know that China is the second important country in today's world. So we'll discuss about India's relation with China, number two. And after that, we'll also discuss India's relation with Russia, because Russia is emerging very powerful in today's world. And as you have seen in the Ukrainian crisis and in the Middle East, where it's very difficult to strike a deal with these states unless until you have Russia on the table. And Russia economically is again quite powerful. So India's relation with Russia is important constituent of important subject of today's discussion. So we'll talk about the two things. One is the bilateral relationship between India and these countries, and we'll also talk about multilateral relationship, the way India has been dealing with these countries through multilateral organizations. So that will be the important part of the debates. But finally, we'll conclude with what are the opportunities and challenges in terms of India's relation with these countries. So these are the major subjects that we're going to cover. And we'll start with the historical outset, that historical background. If you go back to the history, especially the 1950s, when India got independence, as you know, in 1947, and the way it started dealing with the major powers. In 1950s, the major powers, as you know, were countries like United States, which was leading the capitalist bloc, and the Soviet Union, the USSR, which was leading the other bloc during the Cold War period. So during that period, India, the international system was bipolar, and India was trying to adjust in this kind of situation. So how did India deal with the bipolar situation in the 1950s, which continued till 1991? So that will cover the initial part of my discussion. As you know that that NAM was an important method to deal with the two superpowers that you had, United States and the USSR. NAM as a policy, it was an attempt to find a way to deal with these powers in a very strategic and very conflicting environment. NAM was basically an attempt by India to continue or to have its strategic autonomy, where it is not succumbing to any pressure from either United States or to the Soviet Union. So NAM was basically a method for strategic autonomy. It was an attempt to deal with these two powers while at the same time maintaining strategic autonomy of India. As you know, that alliance with United States in that kind of situation would have meant subordinating India's interest. And that was not something which was acceptable to Indian leadership, or that was not acceptable to the Indian public. Keeping in mind that if you see the context, that India had just emerged as a newly independent country, and United States belonged to the same bloc of the colonial powers like Britain, France, Germany, and these countries. So they had formed the bloc, and it was very difficult for India to go all in all with these states. So what was the option for India in that kind of situation? The other option for India was to go with the socialist bloc, where Soviet Union was the leader. But that was not possible because India feared that the policy of India, the foreign policy or the strategic policy of India should be independent of any bloc. It should not be guided by the interest of these two blocs. So, and also please keep in mind that when United States was considered to be an imperialist bloc, because India had fought against Great Britain, and Great Britain was part of the alliance where US was also a part. So India could not have gone with that, but at the same time, if you see the policies of Soviet Union during that time, Stalin was the ruler. Stalin was the ruler of Soviet Union, and the policy of Stalin was very inward. He was not trying to encourage the leaders of the third world countries, and he was not very supportive to the third world countries, although he supported the colonial struggle. But as you know, the socialism in one country was the policy of Stalin during that time. So in that context, it is Soviet Union was not very forthcoming to countries like India. Soviet Union considered that India was semi-capitalist kind of country, and it was not a socialist country. So Soviet Union will support India when it comes to India's struggle against the imperialist bloc. But when it comes to forming an alliance with India, even Soviet Union was suspicious. So India did not have much of option. India could not have gone with the imperialist bloc, but at the same time, India could not have gone with the socialist bloc. So what was the option for India? The best option for India was to have an alliance with the third world countries or the developing country, as it came to be known later. So that was the broader context when India's foreign policy is taking its first initial steps. And as you know, Nehru was the kingmaker, or the Nehru was the master of India's foreign policy. He was the one who was dealing with India's foreign policy. So in that context, Nehru, along with the other leaders, they developed a policy which will ensure some kind of autonomy in terms of foreign policy. And India, along with countries like Yugoslavia, then Indonesia, then Ghana, these were the blocs which formed NAM, which came to be known as Non-Alignment Movement, which basically meant that India will not be part of any of the blocs. So this NAM was a very strategic kind of attempt by India and countries like India to maintain its strategic autonomy. Also, please understand that India was more sympathetic to the Soviet Union and the blocs led by Soviet Union, partly because of the socialism which had anti-imperialist content. One of the basic features of NAM during that period also was to support anti-colonial movement in the countries which were under the colony of one of the Western countries. So since socialism of the Soviet Union had anti-imperialist content or elements, so naturally there was a kind of understanding that there was some kind of natural attraction of Soviet bloc with India and India's attraction to a Soviet Union. So, and Nehru was influenced by Fabian socialism, which is known as the gradual evolution towards socialism. So as a result, India was sympathetic towards the Soviet bloc, but it was not part of any bloc till 1971. And as I'll discuss in the lecture later, in the later part, that India's relation with United States was also very cordial in the first few years, especially from 1947 till 1965. In 1962 at least, India's relation with the United States was not bad. It was considered to be a cordial relationship. Only after the defeat of India by China and India's struggle with Pakistan in 1965 and India's struggle with 1971 with Pakistan, that was the period when India's relation with the United States soured, or India's relationship became tense with the United States. And we'll discuss about that when we discuss bilateral relationship between India and the United States. But please understand that there is also an understanding that capitalist economy dominated by the Western financial capital was not something which was liked by the leaders like Nehru, and they did not want India to be one of the peripheral states like the Latin American states or the African states. Nehru always had a grand vision of India. Nehru guided by sometimes what is called the history and tradition of India, that India has a very high place in the international power structure, and with India's grand vision, it was impossible for Nehru and the other leaders to subordinate India's interest with one of these blocs. And as I told you, that Nehru, as a Fabian socialist, he was also suspicious of some of the Western motives in the third world countries. But there's as you know that in post 1991 period, there were several critics who started criticizing NAM as something which has failed to achieve its objectives, number one, and they also argued that NAM was not relevant. So now it's important to understand whether NAM is still relevant, and second, whether it succeeded in achieving one of its objectives that it had set during the early years. Now we need to contextualize NAM in the sense that because NAM evolved during the period when India was a colony, or against the background when India has emerged just from the colonial period. And if you see the geopolitical reality of that period, India did not have a better option than the NAM. Now the question is, did it fail to achieve the objective? No. My answer would be no, because through NAM, India succeeded in maintaining the strategic autonomy, which was the main purpose of NAM. So we cannot say that the NAM failed to achieve its objectives. Now the question that comes into anybody's mind that whether NAM is still relevant in today's context or not. As you know that NAM was a specific policy which emerged in the bipolar world. But after the 1991, the world became unipolar, where the United States was the only hegemon. In that context, there was no bipolarity. So what is the question of alliance with? What is the question of non-alignment with when you do not have two or more powers? So world is not bipolar after 1991, and India is also not weak now. Please understand that NAM was an attempt to maintain the autonomy of a state which was weak in comparison to the developed countries. So India is not a weak state now, and there is no fear, as it was in the early years. There is no fear of being recolonized. So the context has changed. So India's responses have to change. So similarly, we cannot say that that everything of NAM has become irrelevant. But in fact, even today, some of the policies, some of the principles of NAM are relevant. For instance, the strategic autonomy. That is still important, and all the countries are trying to maintain the autonomy. And if you see the BRICS, where Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are the members, in BRICS, some of the policies of the BRICS are very similar to some of the policies which were adopted by the NAM in the earlier years. For instance, BRICS is talking about creating an alternative financial structure, and NAM through G77 and other economic groupings was always fighting against the economic dominance of the Western states. So some of the policies which were there during the NAM period, they have been inherited by the various blocs which have emerged. Maybe that the nomenclature is not important. Whether NAM should be there or not, that's not important. What is important is that whether NAM succeeded in maintaining India's autonomy, and second, that whether NAM, some of the principles and the values of NAM are still relevant or not. Some of the principles, as I told you, that they are still relevant, and they are being expressed through various organizations and through different negotiations with the developed world. Now we have a situation where the new situation is emerging in 1990, especially after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. What we see after that is emergence of a unipolar world, where United States is the only power, and it became very dictatorial in its term, in the way it was dealing with Kosovo, Yugoslavia, the way it was dealing with Iraq, the way it was dealing with Afghanistan. It became very authoritative in the sense that the pressure and the pull, or the geopolitical balance which was there during the previous period, that was not there. There were no constraints for the hegemon, which was United States. So and since 1971, India was very close to the Soviet Union through the Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty in 1971. So after that, India found after 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed, India found itself in a very difficult situation. There was a complete vacuum because there was nobody to support India. While Pakistan, in a sense, for some time it appeared that Pakistan was the victor, because Pakistan had the support of China, which was emerging as the second important country, and Pakistan had the support of the United States. So for some time it appeared that Pakistan is emerging as the victor with the support of China and United States, while India was the loser, because India lost the support which it had with the Soviet Union. But if you see India's response in the 1990s, so gradually India is trying to establish, to evolve its policies in in a fluid kind of situation which was there in the 1990s and afterwards. So if you see the India's policy, the way it has responded to a new international environment. So first it started with the Lookist policy of 1991, where it emerged during the Narasimha Rao's period. Narasimha Rao was as you know, was the Prime Minister in the 1991 period. So where he believed that that the previous distance which India maintained with the Southeast Asian states, that was no longer desirable, because the Soviet Union was not there, the bloc politics had ended. So India started having a closer relationship with the Southeast Asian states, and some people argued that this was also a policy of India to counter China in the Southeast Asian states. So that was a kind of if you have good relation with Vietnam, for instance, if you have good relation with Philippines and other countries, so that can be one of the methods to check the growing Chinese influence in Southeast Asian states. But I think Lookist policy was more guided by economic requirements of India rather than the geopolitical or the power motives. So that was followed by in 1996, what you see, when Gujarat was the foreign minister during Deve Gowda's prime ministership. So he gave the doctrine of what is known as the Gujarat Doctrine. Here the focus is again shifting to the South Asian countries, the neighboring states. Gujarat Doctrine basically argued that you have to have a very strong relationship with the neighboring states, especially with the SAARC countries and Afghanistan. Because they feared in that kind of situation that one of these states like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Pakistan, they might come under the influence of United States or China. So in that kind of situation, it was very important for India to have a very strong relationship with the South Asian states. And as you see that during that period, the Gujarat Doctrine also emphasized that the territories of the neighbors should not be used by any other third power against the third country. So basically, India is trying to evolve a policy where it will have a strong relationship with the neighboring states, and at the same time, the policy of non-interference and the territory not to be used by other countries. So these were some of the principles which were emphasized by the Gujarat Doctrine. Then in 1998, the BJP government, when it comes to power, one major event takes place which shaped India's foreign policy afterwards very dramatically and very drastically. That was nuclear blast of 1998. That completely changed India's policy. As you know that the previous blast was in 1974, and the second blast which took place in 1998. So that had a huge impact on the international politics, and that was followed by the blast five nuclear blast. First, the 5 nuclear blasts took place in India, and that was followed by nuclear blasts or nuclear tests in Pakistan. So that created a very difficult situation for the international community, because India, as you know that the international proliferation regime, the countries which dominate that regime, they do not allow other countries to become one of the nuclear weapon states, because they believe that that might lead to proliferation of nuclear weapons to some of the countries which are rogue states, or some of the non-state actors which might misuse the nuclear weapons for their own purposes. So 1998 blast was a turning point in India's foreign policy, and after that the entire context changed, and this was followed by the sanctions by United States. When Clinton was the president of United States, so Clinton imposed a lot of sanctions on the defense installations in India. But as you know that most of the sanctions in today's world fail. Only 30% of the sanctions in today's world have succeeded. Similarly, the sanctions which were imposed by United States on India, United States, Japan and other countries on India, they did not succeed in its objective, and it was soon realized that the Western countries like United States and Japan, they are losing much more than what they are gaining from the sanction. And it did not have practically any impact on India in terms of rolling back its nuclear program. So what was done, and India as a national state, as an emerging economic powerful state, was not willing to listen to the pressures of United States and Japan and other Western countries, including China as well. China was also critical of India when India undertook the nuclear test. After that, the major event in India's foreign policy was the Kargil War. the Kargil War between India and Pakistan in 1999, where this was completely unexpected. Probably that was the time when Pakistan believed that the situation is favorable for Pakistan, because India did not have the backing of Soviet Union, while Pakistan had the backing of China and United States. So that was a situation when Pervez Musharraf, and you have the Pakistani army infiltrating into the Indian territory, and you have the Kargil War, where George Fernandez, the defense minister, gave the statement that he'll finish the war in just few days, but it lingered for a long time. Ultimately, Pakistan was pressurized by United States as well as other countries, and Pakistan also realized that it cannot win the war against India, which had emerged as too powerful for Pakistan. So finally, the Pakistan unilaterally decided to withdraw, and there were certain negotiations after that. That was also the time when the Indian establishment started coming closer to United States. Probably what had happened during the Kargil War was a realization that the US pressurized Pakistan to withdraw, and that created a very positive mindset in the Indian policymakers. And after that, what you see is the growing bonhomie, growing relationship between India and United States. One important thing to remember is the Chinese policy in Kargil. In the Kargil War, if you see the Chinese policy, even China did not support Pakistan. The expected support from Pakistan had expected support from China, but that did not happen, and that created a very difficult situation for Pakistan. Pakistan did not have any option but to withdraw from the encroached territory and the encroachment that it had done in the Indian territory. And 2000 was the period when what you see is a complete break in the relationship. Till that time, United States was considered to be one of the estranged democracy, as the term is used, or a democracy which is not very close to India, or is a country which is not very favorable to India. But when Bill Clinton comes to India, that completely changes the situation. Bill Clinton was one of the favorites in India. He was liked by most of the policymakers, and people and the policymakers, they believe that the time has come that when India should have very close relationship with United States, also because of the economic factors. Because India's economy at that time was growing very fast, especially after the liberalization. India's economy, in terms of growth rate, it was very high growth rate, and India was emerging as a very powerful market for the goods of the United States and the Western countries. At the same time, India also thought that, in case India, because India required technology, India lacked many of the sophisticated technology for industrialization, and that was not possible unless until India forges a very good relationship with the Western countries and also with the United States. So that is the period when there is a closer relationship is emerging between India and United States, and very soon the sanctions, the debate on sanctions and the sanctions were stopped, and what you see is the statement from Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who said in 2000 that India and United States are natural allies. This is something which was complete break from the past. US was considered to be a hostile country, but in just 2000 and afterwards, US is emerging as one of the important strategic partners of India, and that was complete break with the past. And that is where some of the people who are critical of India's closer relationship with the United States, they argue that India must have a different kind of policies, and the NAM, which was relevant during the previous years, NAM is not relevant because India is getting closer to the United States. But while the establishment, especially the bureaucrats and who were trained during the earlier years, they believed that some of the values of NAM were still relevant, but India continued to move closer to the United States, especially after 2000 and 2001. And then you have the US intervention in Afghanistan, and in that India went to the extent, the BJP government went to the extent of offering the base to the US Army. That was something which was unimaginable in the previous years. So that is a situation which explains the changing contours of India's relation with the United States. Finally, it ended with the Indo-US civil nuclear deal which was signed between Manmohan Singh and George Bush between 2005 to 2008. So that marked a significant radical departure in India's foreign policy. Now I'm coming back to India's relation with the United States during the Cold War years, and I'll briefly explain how India's relationship was there with the United States. One of the obstacles during the Cold War years was that India was obsessed with the concept of strategic autonomy, and since US always saw India as a weak state who will rather be subordinate to the interest of the United States, so that was one of the major obstacles of India-United States good relationship. And please understand that the United States was very close to Pakistan. Pakistan was an ally of United States, and United States was also very close to China, especially after the 1960s. So what is happening that United States was very close to two of the countries which were hostile to India, and that created a very difficult situation for India to have a good relation with United States. And the final departure and the break came in 1971 when Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty was signed. This had an element of almost like a collective security arrangement, where if India was attacked by one third country, that will lead to automatic interference by Soviet Union in favoring or supporting India. So that created a complete break between India and the Western Bloc, and it was believed, and many of the Western authors argued that was kind of also jettisoning, or that was a departure from the India's policy of non-alignment, and it almost became a partner of Soviet Union. It became a partner of the Soviet Bloc. And after that, there is a tense atmosphere emerging, and US supported Pakistan on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir on every discussion in the United Nations, and US also insisted on keeping India out from the nuclear club, despite the fact that India tested its nuclear bomb in 1974 the first time. And weak Indian economy and the planned economy was something which was not very attractive to the United States. So US interest was very limited in the 1970s and later on. So how do you describe India's relation with the United States in the last 65 years? Broadly, 1947 to 1962, that period can be considered the cordial relationship. And in fact, you'll find it hard to believe that in 1962 war with China, US helped India politically and diplomatically. It was not the Soviet Union which was supporting India in 1962 in the war against China. It was the United States which gave diplomatic and some kind of military support also to India against China. But what you see afterwards is a complete departure. 1965 to 71, and that relationship was very frosty and tense, because Pakistan was an ally of a junior partner of United States, and India had fought two wars with Pakistan, first in 1965 and the second in 1971. So in 1965, US also imposed an embargo on Indian arms, supply of US arms to India. And in 1971, when the Bangladesh was created, so that completely led to the break of India's relation with the United States. And during the IndoPak Conflict in 1971, Nixon clearly supported militarily and other diplomatically supported Pakistan. So India could not have a better relationship with the United States in that kind of situation. In 1971 to 1982, they were in the opposite blocks, because the next 10 years India was almost part of Soviet bloc, while United States was supporting Pakistan. So they were part of opposite blocks. In that kind of situation, it was not possible to have a very healthy relationship. Finally, a thaw came when there was a dialogue between Ronald Reagan and the Indian Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So that dialogue led to a kind of what you might call a detente or a thaw in relationship, where gradually they realized that especially United States realized that China was emerging powerful, and they cannot control the Soviet bloc unless until they also try to bring in the Indian to the table, or Indian to the side. So that was again a new situation which is emerging in the 1982 period. So afterwards, Rajiv Gandhi also tried to have a good relations with United States, but finally it was during the Narasimha Rao period which led to the privatization, globalization and liberalization. So that gave an economic incentive to United States. So that created a very favorable atmosphere for Indo-US relationship. And finally what you see is 1998 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh pursued the policies started by Narasimha Rao government. The famous Jaswant Talbot talks after the Kargil Wars, that is quite famous, and I think you know about that. And Vajpayee, as I said earlier, that India and US are the natural allies. Finally, 1, 2, 3 nuclear deal takes place, was signed in 2008, and not only that, India also started having defense exchanges and collaborative defense exercises known as Malabar. That is, Indian Navy and the US Navy, they do joint exercises which is known as Malabar exercises. So that created a very favorable atmosphere for Indo-US relationship. Also please understand that United States is the second in terms of country-wise, after China, US is the second largest trading partner of India. In fact, in 1990s, it emerged as the most important trading partner, economic trading partner of India, and India cooperated with United States in Afghanistan. It was also supporting United States on various other fields in South Asia, in Central Asia. So India's relation with US became very, very strong during that period. But please keep in mind that although India's relations with United States was became very cordial after 2000, but there are certain constraints, and these two countries have not been able to overcome some of the constraints which are there in the relationship. And this is also to do with the US ambition to become to maintain the leadership in the international political situation. That is something which is not like many of the people in India. This is not like, especially by some of the socialist elements in the Congress party. This is also not like by some of the Muslims who think that what US is doing in the West Asia, what US is doing in Afghanistan, what US is doing in Iraq, for instance, what US is doing in Syria today, so is complete trying to subordinate these states, and they have created a situation where the Islamic militants have emerged very powerful in these states, and they are not under the control of United States anymore. For instance, what has happened in Iraq today, that ISIS, that militant organization, which is supported by the US and the Western forces in Syria, so now they have become independent and they have captured many of the territories in Iraq, and Iraq is almost on the verge of Iraq is facing the civil war, and Iraq is almost on the verge of breakup. So that is creating a tension among the Muslim communities in India, and they think that what US is doing in these states is trying to destroy the country and trying to for its energy interest in these regions and for its political and diplomatic interest. US is creating a very unstable kind of situation in the West Asian states. Also, please understand that India had a diplomatic row with on the issue of Devyani Khobragade, where the stripping and searching took place, and that created a very difficult bureaucratic tensions between India and United States. Finally, I believe that these kind of issues are not going to impact the relationship towards states in a very long-term situation, but in a short term, that created a very difficult situation. And finally, also understand that the world is changing. The shift, there is a complete geopolitical and geoeconomic shift which is taking place in today's world, where countries like China and Russia, China, India, Russia, and many of the Asian countries are emerging powerful. In that kind of situation, there is a strange kind of geopolitical pull and pressure for India. On the one hand, you have on the one hand, you have United States, Japan, and the Western countries, and on the other hand, you have countries like China, Russia, where maintaining a geopolitical balance for India and the state like India is going to be difficult. On the issue of, for instance, Ukraine, India took a position that that Russia has a legitimate interest in Ukraine and the Crimea. So that was a complete departure from the previous policies, where India was supporting United States on on the issue of Iran previously, on the issue of Sri Lanka previously, but in the case of Ukraine, there is a complete shift. So India is also coming under some kind of geopolitical and international pressures, which is emerging in today's world because of the economic factors, because of the geopolitical factors. India knows that India cannot be an ally of United States because of its domestic issues, because of the autonomy issue, because of various other factors. But at the same time, India cannot have very close alliance with the other bloc. I think the bloc will not be the right term, but some kind of cooperation which is emerging between Russia and China in various forums. If you see BRICS, for instance, if you see Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for instance, where Russia and China are cooperating on various issues. So India is trying to have a balanced relations with these two countries, where India will have a good relations with the United States, but at the same time, India will also be a partner in the BRICS. And as you know, that BRICS is considered to be a very successful exercise, where it's trying to create an alternative financial structure. It has already created a new development bank. It has also created a contingent reserve fund, which is basically an attempt to create an alternative structure to the World Bank and the IMF. Similarly, one of the obstacles of India is also the non-commitment from the US to reform to pressurize international institutions to reform. Especially US is not willing, or it's not very it does not appear to be very committal to reforming institutions like United Nations Security Council, or reforming institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. So unless until these institutions are reformed, where India becomes the member, it's very difficult for India to go very close to United States. And in the near future, I do not see any attempt by United States to reform either United Nations Security Council or reform the international financial structure like IMF, World Bank. And in the negotiations also, like the WTO negotiations, India is on the side of G20, or India is in the side of countries like China and Brazil. So there is a kind of some of the issues. There are certain obstacles and the constraints which do not allow a very close relationship with India and United States. Although both the countries are working for a long time to negotiate on these issues, but some of the obstacles are there between India and United States on these issues. So this was the basic some of the basic details of India's relationship with the United States. Now I'll move to the other country which is very important and which is considered as a major power in today's international situation, and that is China. So Sino-Indian relation, as you know, can be characterized as competitive as well as cooperative. As you know, that China is the biggest trading partner with nearly more than $70 billion trade between India and China. So it has emerged as the most important trading partner for India. It's a different thing that India is facing the trade deficit, where India is exporting less while China is exporting much more. So that is one of the economic issues which India needs to deal with China. But the fact that China has emerged as the biggest trading partner, so that shows how China has become important and how China is pulling the growth in the entire continent of Asia. So that has to be kept in mind. But also please understand that China is a nationalist and very assertive kind of state, where on the border issues that we have with China in the western sector as well as the eastern sector. So on the border issues, some of the indications of China, the way China deals with these issues, that has been very problematic for India. The border issues, the Arunachal issues, and we have the Tibet issues with China. So these are some of the issues that we have with China. Although we are cooperating, India and China both are cooperating through bilateral and multilateral mechanism. But the 1962 war that India had with China, that played a very important, that had a huge impact on the Indian psyche, and there is always a feeling that China cannot be trusted in the Indian among the Indian people. I think gradually we have to move away from that kind of notion. We also have to understand that after 1962 there has not been a single firing on the border between India and China. So although we have one instance of conflict between India and China, but if you see the last 40-45 years of India-China relationship, so that can be characterized as status quo relationship where India and China have not fought any conflict or any war. One of the major issues with China is Chinese support to Pakistan in terms of military and diplomatic support. And since China has been supplying, the technology, missile technology to Pakistan, and China, people believe that China also gave the nuclear technology to Pakistan. So that creates a problem for China. That creates a problem for Indo-China relationship. But the fact that India and China are negotiating on the border issues, and India and China are also negotiating on the issue of economy, trade, and other areas through bilateral and multilateral forums, and India and China now they're cooperating through BRICS. So that's an important indication that some of the conflicts can be mitigated, or the conflicting issues can be sidelined while the important issues can be discussed. So economic issues can be discussed, and the conflicting border issues that can be sidelined for the future resolution. And BRICS is a very successful example of cooperation between India and China. And what are the constants? What are the problems between India and China's strong relationship? I think there is an ambiguity on the border. The first problem is the lack of clarity on the border, because the claim, both India and China claim that China claims that India has occupied its territory, and India claims that China has occupied its territory. So the border issue on the western sector, where we have the territory which was ceded by Kashmir, a part of Kashmiri Northwestern Territory, which was ceded by Pakistan to China. So that is an issue where some kind of agreement is needed. On the issue of Tibet, although India has recognized during the Vajpayee government, India has recognized that Tibet is an integral part of China, but Tibetan refugees, they are in India, and I think they have a right to live in India, partly because India cannot deny the status to anybody who is seeking claim of refugee. So, but there is always a tension among the Chinese that the Tibetans can be used by India against China. But I think some kind of confidence building measures are required, where China need to gain the confidence that India is not working against China, and Tibetans will not be used against the Chinese interests. So that is one issue where India and China they need to sort some of the issues, and India has to send the message that diplomatic and military support to Pakistan is not acceptable, because most of the terrorist activities in India they are stemming from or emanating from Pakistan or Afghanistan. So the Pakistan must get the message that is unacceptable, but at the same time China should also get the message that China should not support Pakistan in terms of military and in terms of missiles and other things. China also uses Kashmir as a card against growing strategic relationship between United States and India. So whenever there is a stronger growing relationship between India and United States, Kashmir card is used by China. So that is something that we need to sort that out. Then trade deficit, that India exports much less than what China exports to India. So that needs to be sorted out. And Chinese claim on Arunachal is something which is creating a tension time and again between India and China, because the claim of China on Arunachal is that Arunachal was the part of Tibetan monastery in the previous historical times. So since Tibet is part of China, so Arunachal Pradesh should also be part of China. I think that kind of proposition is unacceptable for India. Arunachal Pradesh historically and otherwise, Arunachal Pradesh is integral part of India, and I think any leadership, it would be difficult for any leadership to change that proposition. So China has to accept Arunachal Pradesh as an integral part of India, and there should be no claim by China. So that is something which that India and China, that is one issue which India and China need to sort out for a better relationship in the future. Now finally, I am moving to the third country, which is Russia. As you know, that Russia is again emerging as a very important country, and Russia and China are collaborating very closely on economic issues, on the strategic and military issues, and there is a huge energy cooperation which is growing between Russia and China. So and within that context, the relationship of India is very important. Within India and Russia relationship is very important. India and Russia they have a very time-tested and historic friendship. There is a high defense and security cooperation. Excuse me. There's a high defense and security cooperation between India and Russia. India is also cooperating with Russia on the energy issues, especially in Sakhalin 1 and 2, where India has got a share in the Sakhalin. Sakhalin is one of the energy projects in Siberia. So that energy cooperation is there between India and Russia. The space cooperation is there between India and Russia. India and Russia have a trade of nearly 10 billion, and they're planning to increase it to 20 billion in the near future. And China, India, and Russia are also cooperating through multilateral organizations, especially in the BRICS meeting, the 6th BRICS summit meeting that took place in Fortaleza in Brazil. So in that, Russia and India also try to strike a deal on nuclear issues. They also try to strike a deal on energy issues. And if you read today's newspaper, you'll find that Russia is offering 40 billion energy projects to India, and it's very interesting in the sense that the terrain between India and Russia is very difficult, Himalayan terrain, and it will not be easy to have a pipeline between Russia and India. But Russia is offering to build the pipeline, which will cost nearly $40 billion through the Himalaya, or through the alternative route of Tapi. Tapi is the Turkmenistan, Iran, Pakistan and India pipeline. So that was supported by the United States, but Russia is offering an alternative to Tapi pipeline. So if that happens, it will take 5 years according to the Russian scientist. But if that happens, that would be very interesting collaboration between India and Russia, because India always has the dearth of energy resources, gas and oil resources. So if that kind of deal takes place, that would enhance India's cooperation with Russia. Finally, please understand that the mainstay of India's relations with Russia today is the defense cooperation. 12 out of 16 Indian Navy submarines are of the Russian origin. Not only that, the recent Vikramaditya, the giant ship, the carrier ship, which is called Russian Admiral Goskov. So, and in India this is known as Vikramaditya. So that cost India 2.6 billion, but finally it came to India, and that is considered to a very important addition to Indian Navy. If you talk about the Indian Air Force, 32 out of 41 fighter squadrons are of the Russian origin, consisting of MiG-21, 23, 27, 29 and Sukhoi 30 MKI. So 32 out of 41 fighter squadrons are of Russian origin. So it's so highly dependent on Russia that it's very difficult for India to get out of the dependence. And please understand that a fighter aircraft has a life of 20 years. So if once you have bought the fighter aircraft from a country, you'll have to have a very long-term relationship with that state, because you need maintenance of these aircrafts, and that will not come unless until you have a good relation with that state. And not only that, India has also signed the latest 5th generation fighter aircraft deal with Russia, especially with the Sukhoi Corporation. So India's defense relationship with Russia is very strong. In fact, it's very dependent on Russia. Recently, India is trying to diversify its relations with other countries, but this will take time before the new defense cooperation with France, for instance, emerges, or with US emerges. With France, India has signed a deal of Rafale, the fighter aircraft, but it will take some time. And although this is impacting Russia in a way, but the dependence on Russia is still very high, and it will take some time to overcome that kind of dependence. Finally, all the tanks that you have in India, most of the tanks are of the Russian origin. So India's dependence in terms of military hardware, military technology is very high on Russia, and that will not be, that will continue for times to come, at least for 20 years to come. Finally, what is the conclusion? I think geopolitical balancing in a fluid world that you see, where you have Russia on the one hand and US on the other, it won't be easy for India to balance geopolitically these two powers which are emerging. So China always takes the position with Russia against the United States, but India's position is much more ambiguous, because India also wants to maintain a very close relationship with the United States. So in the act of geopolitical balancing, India will have to balance these two blocks which are emerging. And BRICS has given a new hope for friendship with China and Russia. But this would not mean that India will not have a good relation with the United States. In fact, BRICS is seen by India as an economic grouping, but at the same time, India's relations with the United States will also grow. So these are some of the some of the geopolitical contours or geopolitical international system which is emerging, where India needs to balance these groups, and India will have to maintain relationship with all the major powers in a very delicate way. So with this, I come to the conclusion of my presentation. I hope you liked it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for describing in detail what kind of relationship India is carrying with the major powers. Thank you so very much. And I would like to tell all the viewers who are watching us that Dr. Rajan will be tomorrow with us again, and we'll be discussing many new topics under this very topic. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.